he spoke about the flexibility he gets and the freedom he gets from Red Bull Racing, and that's something you don't get at a lot of teams.
12 sprint races. I don't see many positive comments about sprint races, yet they seem to really be doubling down on it.
It's so not sexy, it's so not part of racing, and it's not James Hunt style, go for the win, we go for everything, but it's so boring.
Goodbye to Europe and hello to Azerbaijan. We're back to Baku and we're back for Paddock Update here at GPBlog. I'm Jim Kimberley, your host, and as ever, Tim Kraaij is with me on a race weekend that we're going into where one of the drivers has already been racing last weekend, Tim. Let's start with Max Verstappen, currently the reigning champion. I don't know how much longer that'll last with how the McLaren boys are, but he went away from single-seaters and enjoyed his time doing some GT racing, turning iRacing into real life. What a fantasy come true for the Dutchman. What has he said about that as we go into this weekend?
Yeah, he himself, of course, spoke already on after the Nordschleife run that he did in his GT4 car to get his permit. It was all with the aim for him to get his Permit A license so that he can race in the GT3 car on the Nordschleife Nürburgring, which makes him able to do a 24-hour of the Nürburgring next year already. On that's quite interesting. He doesn't say he will certainly do it already next year, but why get your permit this year already if you don't want to do the 24 hours of Nürburgring next year? And it's not in an F1 race weekend, so it would be possible, but he said to that it can be a little bit tricky because next year can be very busy with the new rules, with the completely new car. So that's something that they're still looking at. He is going to do a next one in a week's time. Next week he's going to run again, but then in the GT3 car of his own team, Verstappen.com Racing, with Emil Frey Racing as well, with his own team. It would be interesting to see how he goes there. See if he will now set the official record on track. But he was very happy. He liked all the procedures and the stuff. Of course, had to get his license, his new driving license. He had to drive behind the instructor on the track for who it was a little bit interesting to have Max Verstappen as behind him as well. He spoke after that weekend as well about it being very interesting to have more horsepower in his car, but still struggling to keep Max behind him. So I think it was a very interesting weekend. I think overall in the paddock that they are very complimentary about what Max did.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit. When I saw Max in some of the photos and videos that came out of social media last week, he looks more relaxed than I've seen him in a Grand Prix weekend. I guess the lack of media obligations. Obviously, there was some media there, but the obligation being different. Is this possibly just on the team or his chances of being champion this year non-existent? Is this why, I don't know if it's Red Bull or Mekis or something that has allowed this to happen? Do you think if there's a world championship on the line that Max would be going off and playing with GT cars this year?
I think he is allowed to do it anyway. I know last year that there was a big discussion after Imola where he had the midnight session and did a 24-hour sim race during a race weekend. I don't think he's allowed to do a 24 hours race when there is F1 weekend, but I think he spoke about that in the paddock today as well on the flexibility he gets and the freedom he gets from Red Bull Racing, and that's something you don't get at a lot of teams. For example, like skiing, for example, is something that in a lot of contracts is excluded, that drivers can do that because the injury risk of skiing is very high. But even in the last few years, Max have been skiing in the past winters as well. And it's this stuff as well, the GT racing, it's like you said, he looks happy. And I think it's going back to the basics of it. Max loves racing. And I think you see that still in F1, but there is a lot around F1 that he maybe likes a little, not maybe, that he likes a little bit less, and rightfully so, I guess. And yet the GT racing is a little bit more back to basics, back to karting, back to just racing with the people he likes and just go on track. And it's a little bit similar to his sim racing activities, of course. And I think that's what you hear from the paddock as well. It's amazing to see a driver who's already on a schedule with 24 races in the season, where he's away for a week or more from family and friends, and then to be in the weekends that you don't have a race, still go racing. It shows the passion he has for racing, the dedication, and I think the reaction from Oliver Behrman today was most telling in saying like, if you do that, it's the best driver we've ever seen. And that coming from a British driver saying that about Max is quite telling, I would say, in terms of, and also in terms of how quick he gets up to speed in those type of cars. So he jumps from car to car and he's instantly quick. Like he drove in a GT4 car, which was limited in horsepower as well. And I think the same car in same category, same power, was 25 seconds slower. And of course, it's a long lap of 10 minutes, but then 25 seconds for your first try is quite impressive. And yeah, I'm curious to see how he will cope next week when he will step into a GT3 car. He already set the unofficial record when he drove there in GT3 car in his own time. Now he's going to participate in a race where he can set the official lap record. So it will be interesting to see. And we will be there again to report it as GPBlog. So keep the site in check for that.
Yeah, Max Verstappen finds Formula One getting in the way of his actual racing career at the moment. It's very funny to see. I'd just like to say, if you are watching and enjoying the conversation we had thousands of people watching in the last few episodes, but only a few hundred people are subscribed at the moment. So if you are enjoying what we're doing, please do subscribe so we can bring more of what you like to see. And let us know what you think about Max Verstappen, if he's going to be going setting GT records, and if you'd love to see him doing the 24 Hours of Nürburgring next year. Let us know in the comments below. Now, Tim, let's go opposite of endurance racing and talk about sprint racing. I have very strong feelings about doing extra races in already a busy weekend. I understand it from the perspective of being at the circuit. You get an extra race rather than a practice session. However, there's two stories coming out this past week about sprint races. So we're going into 2026. We've got confirmed sprint races at China, USA, Canada, Great Britain, Netherlands as a swan song, I understand, to get an extra race. And then very curiously, Singapore, which if sprint races are meant to be the full excitement of, we've got half an hour to go and get loads of overtakes, Singapore, very interesting choice. And then secondly, and we'll come on to this separately, 2027 opening up idea of having 12 sprint races, most likely to be half of the calendar. I don't see many positive comments about sprint races in the Formula One community, yet they seem to really be doubling down on it. What's the story?
Yeah, for next year, it makes sense. They want to keep it the same because there is already such a huge change in regulations for next year that they don't want to do many things for that season, changing to those regs as well. So we get 6 races. I think most of them make sense. Zandvoort and Singapore don't, in my opinion. And I think if you listen to the drivers speaking today on the paddock as well, being asked about it, they're really aiming for like sprint races are good in a way, but they need to be on certain tracks where you can overtake, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to do a sprint race, because otherwise it's just 30 minutes of extra parade laps. And that's what you get normally, especially with not many points on the line. That's the 2026 situation.
So 2027, the sprint race situation that we understand at GPBlog, not so much public, I believe, but what our understanding is that you've been able to find that looking at different options and changing it from 2026, is it likely to happen, and what are those options?
Yeah, our understanding is that there will be talks between F1, FIA, and drivers and teams for 2027 to see what they can do on the sprint races. That they will have talks about increasing the amount of sprint races. So first of all, that they look at maybe up it to a maximum of 12, so the half of the calendar that we have of 24 races. So it's the amount of sprint races that they will do, but also looking at the format. That's a very broad topic, so that can be in terms of points, but also reverse grids is still a topic that keeps on coming back, something that a lot of people, or some people higher up the ranks are looking forward, because it increases overtaking. But I think if you listen to the paddock today, and if I would voice my opinion in there as well, it's like it's going against everything F1 stands for, that you want to have the best in the front. And of course, for F2, F3, I think Oscar Piastri said it in the right way. F2, F3 is a place where drivers showcase themselves for being in F1. But F1 is all about that title, all about those wins, and those things need to be valuable. And if you get a podium or a win because of a reverse grid, because you were last in qualifying or 10th in qualifying, you're gonna give advantages to people who are not doing the job properly or not doing them as good as some others. So I think that goes against everything F1 stands for, and I hope that doesn't come to fruition in F1. And that's something that you hear from the drivers as well, even from the drivers who are driving at the back right now, like Pierre Gasly with Alpine. So even that, they are saying like maybe it's not that good for F1. In terms of the sprint races, it's mixed. I'm with you on the feeling on sprint races as a F1 fan from the old days, and not that I'm that old, but I really
Come on, mate. We're both old. We have to admit it at some point.
Okay, sorry, we're old. Yeah, I like the normal format, like the 3 training sessions, looking into that, speculating about everything that's coming up, and then the peak of qualifying in the Grand Prix on Saturday and Sunday. But I understand with the evolving world that we live in and the environment that we live in, where people get a lot of things very quickly and the attention span is very short, that they want to have more action within a weekend, and that the practice session on 2 practice sessions on Friday are not that attracting to people to watch, not to the new audience at least. And I think if I look at the weekends that I attend, you now sometimes miss it as well when it's not a sprint race weekend, that you miss some action on Friday and you're like, oh yeah, we didn't have a qualifying, or there isn't anything else. And I think MotoGP does a good job on having now sprint weekends every race. Would I like to have it at all races? I don't think so. I don't think it would suit every race, like I said. But I think if you would pinpoint a good amount of Grand Prix where you can overtake, where a sprint race could be beneficial, I think it wouldn't be a big problem to have more of them with the audience being there, because it gives you an extra qualification, gives you an extra race. And as a spectator, I've been to races as a spectator myself as well. The sessions are quite dull as a spectator, because you see a screen. Of course, nowadays it's a little bit better, but still you see a screen and you see cars driving around, but you don't get anything that's going on. And with qualification, that's different. With the race, that's different. And if you have more races, more qualifications, I think the weekend tickets are going to be sold a little bit more, and you will have more attendance on Friday and Saturday.
I do understand it from the perspective of a fan, and I've been there several tracks where that Friday is almost skippable. But on the same side of it, as a fan not at every race, and I'm in the industry and I'm thinking, okay, well, if I wasn't and I'm working the 9 to 5, the last thing I really want is obligation to watch on a Friday, obligation then to watch on a Saturday, obligation to watch on a Sunday. I understand, even as a race fan, that's exciting when there's 16 races, but 24 and then turning half of them into a 3-day event to watch when you've got your own family commitments, social commitments, anything else. It does seem a lot to me. The only thing I think from a sprint race, and maybe you can tell me your thoughts on this, and maybe you in the audience can let us know your thoughts on this in the comments as well. I would love to see it from a perspective of those FP1 rookie drivers, potentially half of the sprint races or something like this. You have to give up one of the cars to one of your academy drivers or something like that, just to make it a little bit more worthwhile to watch. Like you say, the parade lap, it's just unnecessary to go to Zandvoort and to go to Singapore and put those cars for an extra 20 laps of the race. You're extending the race in some way. I know now they've changed it to have the qualifying session differently, but I'd love to see, like we saw with Behrman, like we saw with Colapinto, having that chance to step up and then shine, to potentially have a driver who maybe wouldn't have made it. Am I going a bit too off the rails to make this a bit more of a spectacle? If it turned it into maybe a non-championship or a constructors only points or something slightly different, a sprint only championship, if they have to go this way.
Yeah, then it will become a little bit more of a farce, I would say, in terms of like, yeah, like...
You're stupid, Jim, is basically what you said.
No, that's not what I say, but it's becoming more F2 than F1. And it's like, if you do a sprint race, it's still part of your weekend. So you're not going to do a training session and you're going to do a sprint session where you then exclude some drivers who will have a disadvantage for the rest of the weekend in that as well. And if they crash, if the young guys crash their car, they have an issue as well for maybe the qualification later on. So I think there are things around that are making that a problem. It sounds nice, but like for example, they have now talks about a rookie sprint race at the end of the season at Abu Dhabi for multiple years now, and they postpone it every season because they can't get their plans straight on how they could facilitate that, because you need to have the people there, you need to have the drivers there. It's all getting longer and longer, and I think that's the main problem. And I think for the young drivers, F2, we need to improve F2, maybe make that more closer to F1. But I think that is the platform where you can show yourself as a talent. And in the end, the big talents are always getting their seat in F1. And I think that's where F2 and F3 is for showcasing yourself, like Oscar said, to be ready for F1. And then in the end, you need to be ready when you get a chance in F1. And some are swimming and some sunk to the bottom of the lake. That's how it goes. I think, that's something that you will always get. But in terms of sprint race, I think for me overall the problem is we race for almost nothing. So like the win is 8 points and only the top 8 gets points. And with the situation that you have right now where you have 4 top teams, they basically get all the points. So you don't fight for much. And I think that's the bigger problem of F1, where you have 2022 cars and only 10 spots for points. And even on Grand Prix weekends, it's like people retiring just to save an engine or make sure that they can make changes to the next race without having issues with the FIA or stuff like that. And I think in that sense, it would make sense to maybe overhaul the whole point system. But then you have people like, then getting points is not that valuable again. So you always get in difficult conversations with that. So I think the sprint race that we have is way better than it was initially, with only the top 3. And with it affecting the Grand Prix as well. I think it's better as a standalone as it's now. Is it perfect in the way it is? I don't think so. But to be honest, I don't see a better solution at the moment anyway.
I just say, just stop them. But that's just me. That's why I'm going with these ridiculous farces, as you called them. It's unnecessary in my opinion, but who am I to say what's going to go on? I'm not the FIA president yet, but maybe one day. Let's move on to somebody who maybe would have enjoyed the sprint race idea I had, a rookie. Isack Hadjar, he shone in some of the FP1 sessions, really impressed Helmut Marko with the feedback, ends up getting a drive at Racing Bulls, and arguably the standout rookie of 2025. I'm getting ahead of myself. 2026, though, he might be making a step up. We speculated about it for quite a while, and then that podium at Zandvoort really accelerated those sorts of rumours. Seems to be a bit more substance to those rumours right now, though. That speculation turning into something a bit more firm, Tim.
Yeah, as far as we understand, there's no decision made on next year. I think it's fair to say that everyone, knows that Max Verstappen will get a new teammate. 26. I think that's not a secret anymore. The question is who, but looking at Racing Bulls, Isack Hadjar is the one to push forward. And it's quick after one season, but at least he got a full season, so that's already better than some others did. Then he gets the full preparation. He gets to step into 2026 in a completely new car that's not already managed in a way that Max knows his way around the car, so that will be a little bit more easy for him to get in. But I think that's the most sensible thing for Red Bull to do right now. I think going longer back, I think it would made more sense earlier on to get a more experienced guy in. But with everyone locked in now, there's not really a suitable replacement there. So I think it's very sensible to get Isack in right now. And especially with a lot of uncertainty about the future of Red Bull as well, in terms of how competitive they will be, how competitive their engine is, if Max will stay after 2026, if the car is not compatible. So I think there are a lot of question marks around Red Bull, which makes them not, how strange it is to say it, as the former world champions, but they are not the best destination or the most attractive destination now for drivers to be, because there are a lot of question marks question marks about their new project.
We're going to go away from Isack Hadjar and to the driver, which I thought would have been a really good signing for them amid all of the controversy of going on. Carlos Sainz ends up going to Williams. Carlos Sainz, though, involved in an incident for the second race running, but the first race, that incident was with Liam Lawson, and he was on the outside. It was controversial at the time, and his radio was hilarious. It turns out that, well, he said he wanted to speak to the stewards after the race because he wondered about how to go racing. They overturned their decision to penalise him by 10 seconds. Can't change the result. That's happened. But penalty points wiped off of his record. But now Carlos is gunning, I guess, for the idea of having full-time stewards staying in the stewarding room to help with the decision-making. I don't know if angry is the right word, but he certainly wasn't happy at Zandvoort, and it doesn't seem to have abated by the time, we're 3 weeks away now from that race, and it's Baku, and he's still talking about this decision.
Yeah, he said it felt like a breakthrough in terms of the FIA decision to at least scrap his penalty points. So there's some positivity. But yeah, I think overall, we've heard from a lot of drivers today, all speaking about the issues in terms of the guidelines, that there are so many guidelines. But yeah, when you're in that car, you're not going to think about those guidelines. It's not that you on the outside and think, oh, I'm on the apex, my axle is a little bit in front, my axle is a little bit behind. That's not what you think about in a car when you go with those type of speeds. So they all drive on instincts, and with the lack of consistency in terms of the refereeing, that's the main issue, and that's something that the drivers will speak again to the FIA also this weekend, that they try to get new things out, because yeah, overall a lot of drivers still say that they don't really know where they're at, they don't really know what they're gonna get from the stewards. And yeah, then again, the discussion about permanent stewards pops up again. FIA response to that always is who's going to pay for that, which is quite a shocking argument, I would say, especially with the FIA. Yeah, also promoting their financial status and the money they make over whole seasons. And I'm not saying that they should pay for everything, but I don't believe that the payment is the big issue there. Because the FIA also said, yeah, it's not always the ideal solution, because with permanent stewards, you tend to get more stewards that are subjective in some instances and with some drivers. And there's something to say for that. But I think it's always better than what we have right now, where we have some freelancers that get a fee where they can get some candy in the store and go back home. That's all they can get. That's not really sensible, and we've seen instances where the likes of Johnny Herbert are not being held in that role because they do other stuff outside of stewarding, being a pundit, because they can get money there and they don't get money in that job. But it's still talking about a farce. It's still very strange that we have a situation in a very worldwide, very, 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 very big sport, very professional in all layers of the businesses, and then not having full-time professional stewards. And then the FIA will say, oh, they are professional and they get educations and stuff like that, but they're not full-time professionals. And I know they have all the right intentions, but yeah, it's very strange that we're sat there with some freelancers that are on race to race, very different one to the other. And yeah, I think it's very telling that every driver says that they don't have a clue of what's going on and when they get a penalty or not. And I think guidelines will always be in the gray area. And I think you can't write a guidebook for all the scenarios that could happen in a race or race incidents, or that you can write it in a way that it's very clear it's this penalty, or it's that penalty, or we need to give that guy a penalty. But that's where you need good referees, professional referees, full-time referees that can make those judgment calls on a day-to-day basis in a consistent way. And that's what you see in every top sport, and that's not what you're seeing in F1 right now.
Do you think it is a breakthrough then, what Carlos Sainz said, because he felt that it was a breakthrough to go and appeal it and then win the appeal, which is very rare in our sport, where it's almost opaque what goes on when that appeal process happens. You get the document, but it doesn't really explain what happens apart from upon reviewing further evidence. Is this an actual breakthrough that there is some conversation to be had?
I think the breakthrough was in fact that they didn't look at the letter of the law and that's why Carlos Sainz initially got the penalty, was because he was on the outside at a certain point in the corner, and that's where they go with. And I think in this instance, Liam didn't have his car under control. So the situation is different than from your guideline book. And yeah, the stewards in a lot of decisions looking just at the guidebook and just going with that, where sometimes you need to have some common sense and see like, okay, Liam is not having that car under control. This was his fault and not Carlos's. Have that turned around, yes, that's a very big thing, because to have a right of review, you have to have new footage, you have to new angles, you have to deliver a whole package of new information. That's why not many teams do it, because they all see it as you can't win that case. So this is the first time almost that it really works. So maybe that sets a new standard, but let's see how we move forward from this.
Be a nice precedent to set to be able to go and look for common sense in our sport, which sometimes can lack it. And speaking of lacking common sense, Papaya rules, finally, let's just touch on this a little bit, because the last race at Monza, common sense seemed to escape McLaren, especially based off the backlash I received online, asking Oscar Piastri to let Lando Norris through after the botched pit stop. They could win the championship, the Constructors Championship, this weekend in Baku. What have the drivers said about what can happen after this? Is it possible that Papaya rules might make way for some wheel-to-wheel action?
No, that won't change much. I think the most interesting thing was the explanation of Oscar, because after the race in Monza, he was still a little bit frustrated. That's what you heard, especially with the board radio, and he stand by that board radio after the session as well, that he said, it says enough, what I said there. I think the point was what they now try to make, how they try to turn it around, is that they say that it was not the bad pit stop that made them to change the place around, but it was the decision before, because they pitted Oscar early because there was a threat of the undercut of Charles Leclerc. And they asked Lando Norris before that pit stop, are you okay with giving Oscar the first pit stop? Because he was in the lead of the two then, at least. Are you okay with giving him the first pit stop? Because we're on threat from Leclerc. And he asked if he would be under threat of the undercut from Oscar. They said negative, so he was okay with the decision. But the undercut became a problem because of the bad pit stop. So they still say, and Oscar still says, that they don't see, or that they see a bad pit stop as part of racing. So a bad pit stop itself won't always be a case of, okay, now we give the place back. So if this happens in Baku again, they won't give the place back. But it was the decision before to give that first pit stop to Oscar what made them to make the decision to give the place back. My reaction to it, it's a lot of talk, and it's a lot of...
You've used the word a lot. Just say fast. Go on.
it's they make it so difficult, it seems. And on one hand, you feel like, okay, they are almost already wrap up the Constructors Championship. If they do it in Baku, it will be the first time ever, or the quickest time ever that they will be able to do it. So in a way, it works for them, and they're probably going to get that World Driver Championship as well. So in a way, it works for them. But it's so boring to watch and listen to it, because you listen to switching things around and talking about, like Oscar was talking about, deserve to be third. But it's not about what you deserve, right? It's about what you managed to get. It's not about where you deserve to be. Lando, with the car he had, maybe deserved to win the World Championship last year, but he didn't deserve it because he made a lot of mistakes, and McLaren made a lot of mistakes. So talking about what you deserve and give the place that you deserve, it's so not sexy. It's so not part of racing. And it's not James Hunt style. We go for racing and we go for the win. We go for everything. It's there. It's all you go. No, you go. You deserve it today. You get the win today. So even he was asked about, would it be the same for the win? And it was like, it would make things maybe a little bit different, more difficult. But I don't know if I would have kept the lead back then. And even with that, I'm like, You would give a win away? But yeah, they already did last year, so it can't surprise me anymore, but it still does.
Just give gold stars out to everybody, then everyone's a winner. It's not the sport that we want, but maybe we'll see in Baku. We've seen some chaotic scenes in the past. With thinking Lewis Hamilton and Vettel. We had Max and Ricciardo. We had brake magic. All these fun bits at Baku always seems to deliver some sort of chaos. So hopefully when I'm speaking to you on Sunday for the next paddock update after the race, we'll have a lot of chaos to unpack, maybe with McLaren as the Constructors Champions. We'll see. We'll see on Sunday evening what we're talking about. But if you want us to talk about anything specific, let us know in the comments. And until then, Tim, thank you for everything you brought to us so far from the Baku paddock. And thank you everybody else for watching.